Best.Podcast.Ever is brought to you by the Gertzberg Law Firm, a full-service business and litigation firm in Cleveland, Ohio. Practical and results-driven, the award-winning attorneys at Gertzberg Law have both in-house corporate and large firm backgrounds and have built a one-of-a-kind firm that is changing the way clients engage, work with, and pay for their attorneys. Visit gertzberglaw.com to learn how we're different. Gertzberg Law Firm. We solve problems. Enjoy the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to listen to the best podcast ever recorded.
Hi, Molly Gebler.
Hi, Alex Gertzberg.
How are you?
Thank goodness you made that noise before you pressed the start button. People would wonder.
Which noise? This one? Oh, man, we are
That's kind of how my
serious.
day's been.
Really? Why is that? How so?
Well, we had to do our 3-year budget,
Oof. that
which I
sounds
did
awesome.
yesterday. And about 5 o'clock, my computer froze, and I lost everything. And I had to stay up till about 2 in the morning because I had a meeting this morning, a 9 a.m. meeting.
If you would watch a little bit less porn on your Chagrin Falls
Never.
network, it
It
wouldn't
was-
crash as much.
Yeah, horrible,
So-
horrible. We have a big guest today.
Yeah, so
This was necessary.
let's rewind. Let's decide how we came to be here on a fine Tuesday afternoon.
Yes. Well, I came across an amazing chamber member of ours who owns a local business, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
And he did some amazing things, and he shared it on an email to me, and it was just so poetic. His writing is phenomenal. That's not his background, but it was. And I said, oh, this is a guest. So I felt this was a great platform for him to be able to share the amazing work that he did during the hurricane.
Is it weird
So-
that we're sitting here talking about you?
Super bizarre.
So his name is Joe.
Joe what?
Joe Jacobs is an S.
Yes,
At
with an S.
Jacobs.
Absolutely.
And I know Joe's brother. I've known him for several years now. Mr. John. Shout out to Mr. John, who is serving in...
He's in California right now, just San Diego.
And he's another, when he comes back, we need to have him, because he was 20...
Late. It was like when he joined.
Yeah.
It had to have been, around like 23, 24.
And then decided to join the military.
Which branch?
The Marines.
Really?
I know out of all of them,
He's
he decided
bad
to.
ass.
You went all in.
Yeah.
So I asked Joe to be on the podcast. I called you in on a Tuesday.
I was excited about this too, Joe. I was reading about you, and all right, well, let's just jump right into it, shall we?
Yes.
Right. Let's not
yes.
keep people
So, Joe,
in suspense.
you own a local business. Tell us a little bit
Correct.
about your business.
Well, a few years ago, I went to school in Lynn University, or at Lynn University in Boca Raton, Florida. Graduated in 2007. Spent a few years down there.
Having
a couple
some
of years,
fun, for sure.
having a little bit of
Boca Raton.
fun. And
What
then
could be fun about that?
right. And then things started to fall apart at home. Everything from the economy to everything else. So I came home. I decided that you fall back on what you know the best, and that was growing up. Always helping out my uncles, always helping out the family with home repairs or painting or home improvements in general. So at that time, we decided to start a business, and
Who's we?
Well, just me. But I started the business, but I never like to. You'll often hear me reference when I talk about the business as we or us.
Right.
I really don't like to say me or I, because I feel like without the guys that work for us, I guess you could say, I don't even like saying that, but without them, we wouldn't have anything. So
Just as an aside, if I can interrupt, right?
Sure.
Do you notice that, Molly, like that like guests that we have talk a certain way, like business owners and leaders, right? Always like Becky and like pretty much
Nancy
everyone.
talked a lot about
Nancy,
her
it's
team.
always about the team first, and you kind of
Write
there's
that
this,
down as one of the
well,
successful.
there's a really good book by Jim Collins called Good to Great, and that level of leadership. Molly's snoring.
I don't read.
No.
You'll learn from the podcast.
The
I
best,
don't read.
it's a quality of the best leaders in
Yes.
the world is that they quietly step into the background and prop up, all the other people there. So it's just,
Kudos.
yeah, keep going.
Well, I think you'll hear by the story that we're going to tell that's, a lot of what we did is because of the other guys. But so we started the business, and I started the business, and brought on two guys that I've known since I was Billy. My one friend, Billy Rude, I've known. His family in general is known in the village.
Is that a Ted Rude family?
Part of it, yes.
Is that ROOD or RUDE?
OOD.
Okay. That would be. I bet he had some cool nicknames though.
Oh yeah, B Rude, all types of nicknames. But anyway, so I've known him since I was literally before you could actually know somebody, when we were babies, and moving onward, and Evan I've known since the beginning of high school, and two guys that I trust more than anything in the world. So we got the business together, we started it. And, we've been moving forward, and our focal point is trying to make sure that, we obviously stay successful, but at the same time, stay focused on the community and helping out and being honest and trying to be polite and courteous. A lot of, you can find any type of contractor you could think of in the world today, and a majority of them are going to be disheveled and...
A little crass.
Yeah.
When did you start the business?
Officially in the end of 2004.
Okay. And
Or 14, I'm sorry, 2014.
2014, right.
Yes,
okay,
sorry.
so
A
it's
couple
4 years, it's 3 years old.
Correct.
Right? And what kind of home improvements are we talking about?
When we started, we kind of, no pun intended, used a broad brush and tried to get whatever we could to make sure that we were busy. But what we have excelled in and what we are now, known for and what we focus on is deck restoration. That comes down to repairing decks, staining decks, leveling decks, and also, we do everything from painting to power washing. But our two main, our bread and butter, I guess, so to say, would be deck restoration and power washing.
Okay.
And painting. So
Gotcha.
I see your trucks always cruising on you have beautiful trucks too. That's another. I think if someone's pulling into my driveway in the beat up truck,
right,
they've got nice box trucks. Yeah. Just so you know.
Sure. So speaking of trucks,
yes,
somehow we find ourselves driving them in Florida, loaded up with supplies.
True, yes.
Right?
True.
So what's going on there? That's nutty.
Well, the fact that me and the guys have been so close, we often have, it's not a situation where we go to work and then we don't speak to each other until work again. We see each other often out of work. And there's been a lot of times where I've gone to the guys and said, we're a local business. And I know this really isn't a local thing, but I've always said one thing that we need to do and that we should do and that we're obligated to do is help people. I feel like in today's day and age, a lot of these businesses, like as a young business, we don't have a lot of money to throw at things. We can't say, oh, here's $1,000 here, here's $5,000 there, but we can get supplies cheaper than most people. We can offer labor cheaper than most people, but that comes down to them donating their time and me donating our time and supplies. So we've always said, hey, how can we help people? One of these days I said, we need to come together and we need to donate our time. That would mean that you guys won't get paid for it. I won't get paid for it, but we'll be doing a good thing for people. And we've always agreed on that, and wholeheartedly. A resounding and immediate yes, absolutely, from both of the guys. So we recently saw the hurricanes the hurricane first, I guess, and foremost would be Harvey, come and hit Houston. And, we all thought to ourselves, I think like everybody does, like I wish there was more that we could do. I wish there was more that, instead of just sending money, I wish there was something that we could do to help these people.
Well, I wouldn't say like everyone does. I think you're one of the good dudes, man.
Well,
I don't think most people. Well, if they do think that, they don't think about it long enough because there's a ton you could do. You just got to get off your butt.
Right.
You thought it and then did it.
Well, I think that's where
the
it came down to
Yeah.
it. Like the guys will tell you, I think when I do when I make a decision to really do something, I'm sincere about that, and that's why when they know when I ask them something of that nature, that if they say yes, we're going to do it. And that question came up. So the first hurricane came through, and we saw the devastation and the flooding, and then literally, I don't even know, what was it, weeks later, a couple weeks later, we saw that no questions asked, no matter where it went, left or right, this hurricane was going to come and smash into Florida.
Right.
East or west, it was still going to hit. So
What was it, Irma? Is that what
Irma.
that was?
Irma.
So we
That bitch.
and I lived, I know, right? So I lived living in South Florida when I was down there. The years that I was down there was like the end of 03, 04, 05, 06, all the way up to 09. But we were down there during the year that had like 4 or 5 hurricanes come through, and hurricanes and tropical storms, Wilma being the worst. And we were literally in the eye of the hurricane for Wilma, and it was horrifying. You know what I mean? It's absolutely horrifying. Being as somebody who tends to look at risk and be like, oh, I can face that head on, no question. It was one of the only times in my life where you go into it with some buddies and you're like, yeah, this is going to be great. We're going to have a few drinks. We're going to watch the storm come through. We're going to be like, Mother Nature's awesome. and then
And you're pooping
reality comes and you feel the whole building moving and roofs being torn off, and you're going, I just want it to be over. And the scariest thing about a hurricane is like we have thunderstorms here that are pretty bad, but the thing about a hurricane is especially if you're in the straight path of it, you have anywhere from 3 to 4 hours of it building up, and then 3 or 4 hours of it going past. So it's like it's literally a whole day's worth of hell.
So, hey, you know how, like, the pressure, like the barometric pressure or atmosphere, like when it changes, when they're, and you kind of feel it, like, on your skin a little bit?
Right.
Is it, if you're in a hurricane, like, do you feel it like on your skin and your hair or is that just fear?
I think that it probably would be fear. I think that like you could probably feel it if you were in an environment where you didn't. I mean, if you didn't have the winds that they have, it when it comes, it's like it's to a point where you don't even feel that. It's just. It's mass craziness.
And did you drink? Because I know my brother lives on Long Beach
During
Island
Wilma?
in New Jersey, and that's what he said. He said, I'm going to ride, because he's in construction. He wanted to be the first one there. He's like, I'm going to ride it out. I've got this and that. I'm going to have a few drinks. And after, he's like, I didn't touch it because he didn't want to be, he wanted to be full right there in the present, because it just smacked so hard. He didn't want to be drunk or tipsy or anything. Like, he wanted to be able to do what he needed to do.
I would say for us, during Wilma, we were in college. We were stupid. We had been through other smaller storms. We got fairly drunk, I guess is the lack for a better term. But during this one, we did have some drinks. I know that may be a weird thing to say, but if you're sitting in a parking garage in a box truck waiting for a hurricane to come hit you, and you're starting to get shoddy coverage and power's starting to flicker on and off and trees are starting to bend, if you don't have something to calm your nerves, it's going to be a very horrendous another 6 hours.
So let's go back.
Sure.
So you drove into...
So essentially, to get back to where
because you were talking about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we saw the hurricane. We saw the one coming to Florida. And we said, we only have so much work currently that we're on right now. There's nothing that's super important for us to get done right now. Our customers at the time were very kind. I said, we have an opportunity here to do something that, a lot of people don't have the opportunity to do because you have children or a family or lives or jobs or careers. We can take what we can and we can go down to Florida and we can try to help out the best we can. We have all battery-powered equipment, super high-end, crazy. I mean, you wouldn't believe what the tools that we have can do now. Some of them are more powerful than what you can plug into a wall. So we have lights, we have chainsaws, we have all this other stuff. And I was like, we have a box truck. We could just go down there. But the only stipulation is that in order for us, knowing what I had seen in previous hurricanes, in order for us to really make a difference and help, we would have had to have been there right after it hit. So the only way to do that is to basically be through it.
Wait, but that's like to save people's lives and pull them out. Like you can help for a month or two
for sure.
rebuild stuff
to make
right?
the
Well,
most
right.
impact.
Well, right. So that's one of the things where, like, this is where it gets kind of controversial because there's a lot of people who say what you did was stupid. Nobody can, you're only getting in the way. You're only, you're just making things more difficult for everybody. What can you really do? And the only reason why we chose to do what we did and when we chose to do it is because of the fact that I had seen what happens before. Usually 48 hours to 72 hours after a major disaster, things start coming in like crazy. Like the National Guard comes in, FEMA will come in, food and supplies start coming in. At that point, us driving down in a box truck with water and food would be, like throwing, a few grains of sand onto a beach,
Right.
because they're already coming with C-130s full of pallets of water and everything.
Hey, you want is that empty? You want another beer?
I
can't tell.
I'm about halfway through.
All right,
We'll get him.
you holler.
all right,
I'll keep
I
an
will.
eye on it. I'll keep an eye on it.
He's such a good host.
Yeah, you are. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So my thing is like, yes, first responders were always going to be there. We loaded up with a boat. For instance, like, it's one of those things, as an Eagle Scout, you always be prepared for pretty much everything. And if there was going to be flooding, we had a boat with a motor to go house to house if we were told to.
Like you pulled it on behind your.
No, we shoved it in. We have a 16-foot box truck, and I think the boat was about 12 to 13 feet.
Wow.
So we shoved it in with the motor. 200 gallons of gas. It was like between 180, 190, almost 200 gallons of gas. And then literally almost, I think it was around 150 cases of water. And that's heavy for a truck.
That is crazy.
But, so, and food and clothes that everybody, I want
Right.
to make sure that everybody knows that people like Kyle Canner's wife, Jordan, made, this is how awesome, this is the main reason why I wanted to come, is because she went and made individual packages for like a boy of 8 years with a set of clothes and maybe a little toy, and you could throw it out. So to get back to it though, the whole point being is we wanted to come. Sure.
I'm going to keep interrupting.
That's fine.
How did you get, did you put out a shout out saying, hey, I'm about to go down into this hurricane, donate your stuff? I mean, how does that happen?
Finally, Facebook works in a positive way.
Right.
Is that what it was?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I had the idea for like a day or two.
What
as
I
saw
loved
it coming
that you
up.
said was, I didn't want it to pass. I said, why are you doing this? And he said, I didn't want it to be over and then say, I wish I would have gone.
Right.
And I just got chills when you said that.
Well, I feel like that's the way, I don't know, maybe that's not how everybody feels, but I feel like that's the way most people feel, is that like you go, I wish I could do something, and then it's over. And like I said, FEMA comes in. People, like right now, all these places that were destroyed, people aren't thinking about as much. So
you put out a shout.
So I put
on
a shout
Facebook.
out to Facebook.
Yeah.
I said to the guys, I said, hey, do you want to do this? If we do it, we're leaving Friday, which this was on Thursday morning. I said to the guys, I said, Thursday morning, I said, we're going to go if you want to do this. If you say yes, we're going. And they said yes, almost immediately.
How many guys?
Just 2 and myself.
Okay.
So They said yes, and I immediately started drafting a letter onto Facebook saying, this is our plan. This is where we're going to go. We have a box truck that has plenty of room, and we need to fill it with everything we possibly can to help people. And if you can donate, drop it off to this location, and we'll make sure it gets to where it needs.
And what did you like? How much stuff? What was donated? How much of it?
I mean, all of the water for the most part. I bought some of the water, but we had so much water that was donated, which was the most important thing.
Yeah.
After being down there, the water was the most important thing, and we, like I said, we had probably about 150 cases of water donated.
Did you fill
tons
up the
of
whole?
Clothes? Oh yeah, I mean,
filled up the box truck.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And once we put that in the back of the boat, it was the boat
Back of the truck.
Back of the truck.
Yeah.
It was completely packed. I mean, you couldn't even really move around. It was very cumbersome. So, tons of water. People dropped off fuel tanks, chainsaws, a generator, clothes, food, a lot of food, and we just stacked it up. I mean, when you have a box truck like that, you can just load it up. So, and we did. We filled it to the brim, man. By the end, we were going to bring a power washer down solely for the ability to potentially use it as a pump to pump water. And it was so packed that we had to leave the power washer. So everybody donated so much that we couldn't even bring some of the stuff we wanted to.
So you start driving to Florida on a Friday, right?
Late Friday night, after dark. I don't even know exactly what time.
And you're no dummy. I mean, you're a Eagle Scout. You've been in hurricanes, so you're bringing knowledge. You're knowing what these people are going to be going through seconds after the hurricane. So I mean, it's not like me jumping in a car. This is a well-equipped hurricane man.
Right.
Well, I think that's again where the controversy lies. A lot of people say you're an idiot. You're only going to go down there and cause more.
You tell them to call me. I'll handle
They're going to be
them.
like, you're going to go down there and you're going to create one more person to save. You know what I mean? You're going to create one more issue for first responders to deal with. And that being said, after being through as many hurricanes as I had, I knew how to do it safely. Mm-hmm. And we were heading down to Florida, and our goal, we had one of our guys who was a little apprehensive about it. But they know, we all trust each other. They know that I would never put them in a situation where they were going to die.
So how long does it take you to get there?
We drive straight through. I drive a majority of the way, and then once I start, because it's already nighttime by the time we left, we'd spend all day loading up the truck, getting everything ready.
Is it 24 hours?
It's about 17 hours or so straight through.
And is the hurricane still going on when you're there?
It hasn't even hit yet.
Oh, this is before.
Right.
He drove into it.
I didn't fully process that.
It hasn't even hit yet.
Oh.
So it's like still in the Caribbean, and we know that it's going. So we're continually watching weather, and basically the one guy who was apprehensive didn't know, but I'm sure they both subconsciously knew, knowing who I am, that I was going to try to take it straight to it. Because the thing, again, controversial, the thing about it is that if you're not there when it hits, they block everything off. They say, no, we don't need you. You can donate money, and it's like, we want to be there to help people. When this hits and it clears out, we want to be able to go out and whether it's pull somebody's dog off of their house that's flooded, or pull somebody out of a house that's flooded, or drop food off to people who just had their whole house demolished. We want to be there.
So how does the timing work? So you get there Saturday, and when does the hurricane hit?
Well, so we didn't, to make a quick little side story, on the way down there, we didn't fill up with gas before we had left, because we didn't want to go through the mountains with an extra 2,000 to 3,000 pounds of fuel, or whatever the heck it was. I don't even know, but I know it was high. So once we get into Northern Carolina, Northern South Carolina, we already know that there's like a big fiasco. I have friends sending me texts because they saw the Facebook posts who live in the Carolinas that are saying, hey, we can't get fuel right now. So we wanted to get as close as we could without risking it to get gas. So we pull into this gas station.
And this is gas for your containers in the back.
Right.
Yeah.
Which we're going to need for, if there's no gas anywhere, we need to basically be able to get down all the way to Florida
Right.
and all the way back out
Right.
for ourselves in order to be able to do this successfully. So we stop at this gas station, and since I have all cash because nothing is going to have electricity once you get down there, once the hurricane
See,
hits.
like I wouldn't have thought
You know what
that.
that's Eagle Scout shit.
That's
right there.
that is badass.
That's not Boy
man.
Scout
No.
stuff. That's Eagle Scout.
Yeah.
So we
Never
get to
would've
this gas station, and I hand the lady, like, unfortunately, normally you'd slide your card and you just pump until you're done. So I go and I hand this lady, $400, $500. We start pumping gas, and I'm not lying to you, about $200 into it. We have $500, mind you, so there's $300 left. About $200 into it, somebody comes out of the gas station and goes, "Gas station's on fire."
What?
And I'm like, "What?" And I'm not lying to you. I have videos and everything.
Where is this in
Oh
North
my-
Carolina?
I think it was South Carolina. I haven't even looked at the
Did you
exact
run and
thing.
get your $200 or $300 back?
No, the lady, so like 2 seconds later, I'm looking up, and 2 seconds later, the lady behind the counter had come out of the gas station, and they were all like, "Get out, get out." And I'm looking up, and there's smoke starting
What
to
the hell?
come out of the
Is
gas
this,
station.
is this unrelated to the storm, or is this because of the
This is
hurricane?
unrelated to the storm. This is
My
unrelated to the
gosh,
storm.
did you want to turn around and go
Oh, it
home
was-
at that
it was
point?
bad omen.
Well, not for me. I was like, no way, we're still going. But the guy's like, it was one of those things. So the thing starts catching on fire, and we still have like $300 left of gas. And I'm like, "Evan, get your ass over here. Get that empty, line up these empty cans and open them right now." And I'm not even letting go of the trigger. I'm just like going to the next can, going to the next can. Billy's doing the same thing. I'm like constantly being like, "Billy, how much more gas do we have? How much more gas do we
Oh
have?"
my
And he's like,
gosh.
"Oh, we got 20, 30 gallons left on this one." We're going boom, boom, boom. And then all of a sudden, whoop, 10 seconds later, there's fire trucks. I think before we left there were 5 or 6 fire trucks that had come from all around.
Oh my
Hold on a
gosh.
second. Hold on.
Sure.
Where?
Did I mistake what I just heard, or are you saying that you continued to pump gas
yeah.
even though the gas
And
station
pulled
was
out
on?
a
absolutely.
zillion
It was
portable.
It's even more hysterical because we had a boat that we had to pull out first. So we were in a
You were
box truck
shocked.
in a gas station with a boat out in the parking lot. And the motor, and it was like 36 5-gallon tanks of gas all spread out in the pump area, loading all these pumps
That
as the
is
gas station was on fire, and fire trucks are arriving. There were firemen walking into the gas station as we were finally finishing up our thing.
And what was on fire?
I
Not
don't
that
know.
that matters.
It smelled electrical, so I don't know if it
Dude,
didn't.
when I hear the words gas station are on fire, I disappear and all you see is like my lint and my dirt.
Your
My
shit.
shadow. You know?
Normally I would have, but we had all that cash. Like I said, if
Right.
we had the card, we just click it up and go to the next one.
Right.
But we had all that cash, and that cash like needed to fill those tanks. So luckily, we load it all up, and then all these trucks load in, and we pull like an Austin Powers like 15-point turn to get out of there between all these fire trucks, pull out, and like snap a video, get on the freeway, and we all look at each other and go,
What the hell?
"What the hell was that all about, dude?" Like that just happened. Billy goes, "Oh, that was a horrible omen." But
was
we keep
Billy the
going.
nervous one to begin with?
No, it was Evan. Billy was actually really good. Evan was good too, but you could tell he was nervous about it. So anyway, that was just a side note. So that's just setting the tone for the scenario. So we get down to Florida. Our plan initially was, you always have to have a plan. Our plan initially was to go to Boca Raton because I know it like the back of my hand. We were going to bunker down there and be good to go. Well, we saw at that point, once we started hitting Florida, that the storm Irma was going to the west, and us being in Boca didn't seem to be that logical. So we immediately started to cut over, went through Orlando, went straight to Tampa, where it was supposed to, run straight through. And at that point, like you had said, it was Saturday evening, and the first plan of attack was to find 3 places that we could have parked the truck. I liked Tampa because being a city, I knew that there was going to be a lot of parking garages. When you go do these things, like we can't have a box truck out in the middle of the storm. It's just going to blow away, be horrible.
You weren't afraid of a parking garage like falling in or anything?
Potentially, that was the only scary thing, but it's very rare. Most parking garages are loaded up to be able to hold all those cars.
Right.
And I knew that being in a city, they were going to be able to hold even more, being as tall as they normally are.
See, again,
So
That's Eagle Scout.
So we
I
found
never would've
3.
thought that.
We found 3. Billy was pissed because we had been driving for 17 hours. He was like, I just want to freaking stop and like be set and get out of the car and enjoy ourselves. I mean, I guess enjoy yourselves. I mean, by enjoying ourselves, I mean like just be somewhere. Right. So we find these 3 spots because we know that if one fails or if one floods, the water line or the sea level in Tampa is very low, or I mean just the buildings in general are very low comparative to sea level. So we find 3 spots. We find the one that we like the most. We park, and then we relax. It's Saturday. So Saturday, at that point in time in Tampa, you're barely getting any of the outer bands. You know what I mean? You're just starting to get outer bands of rain and some wind.
And are people, do you see people, or are people evacuated?
Believe it or not, you see people.
Really?
You see a lot of people. And, I mean, the roads, comparative to what a regular Saturday would be, it's desolate.
Right.
There's no one on the freeway, no one really on the roads, but there are people out. There are people walking in the park, and it's like, and me and Billy and Evan had all had this conversation. I'm sitting there and I'm looking, shaking my head going, if this was the East Coast, you wouldn't see these people, being so nonchalant about what's about to happen.
They've probably been through it before.
Right. These guys in Tampa, like the houses, when we were looking for places, the houses had no shutters on them. I mean, thank God they didn't get hit, because it would have been horrible. Mark my words, if a real storm ever hits Tampa, it's going to be very, very bad. But
so then what do you get? You find the spot, you chill out.
We chill out, and then we wait, and that's almost sort of the scariest part of the whole trip. So that night, everybody's exhausted.
You're sleeping in your truck?
Right. We have 2.
That's gotta be fun.
We have 2 hammocks sprawled out between the back of the walls of the truck, and Evan was sleeping on the floor in between, under everybody. So we're in this spot. We're just hanging out. We go for a walk. Gorgeous sunset. You would never know in a million years that something destructive is coming.
The storm.
Right. Everybody's walking their dogs, and I don't mean it's like packed, but there are people out who just are walking their dogs and stuff. So we're continually talking about what we're going to do, and what's the next plan, next movement forward. And we fall asleep that night. Like I said, everybody was exhausted. The next morning we wake up, bands start coming in heavier, and the excitement starts. You can tell there's even less people out. The wind's picking up. Now you're only seeing police on the streets. So we are getting more and more antsy, more and more anxious, especially the other 2 guys who have never been in a storm like that before. I'm trying to make sure they know that they're going to be okay.
Is the plan that like you're going to let the heaviest part of the storm hit, and then when it's like the eye of the storm, or when stuff is calm, then you're going to just get on like a police radio and figure out where you're needed? Like, what's the plan on where to go from point A to point B?
Once the storm's over? Well, the plan...
Or when, where to go, when to go?
The plan is to let the storm pass.
Okay.
So you definitely don't want to go out. If you're... I was almost going to say, if you're lucky enough to be in the eye of the storm, which essentially you are, unless you live there and your whole house is destroyed. But if you're in the eye of the storm, you definitely don't want to go out and do anything during the eye of the storm. It's very deceiving. A lot of people die that way because they think the storm is over, and they go out.
Right.
And then the second half comes through, another 4 hours.
So you're going to let the storm pass, and then how would you know where you need to go?
That would all be done, whether it be our phones or we had people who were going to call us and tell us what's going on, what was hit most. So we wake up on Saturday. The police kick us out of the one spot because they say that the superintendent of the building has seen us, and they think it's a liability. So as the bands are coming in, the police say, hey, a common theme of this whole story is they think that a lot of people thought we were looters. They thought we were looters from...
Hoodlums.
Right. Very skeptical. Everybody, especially in Tampa, was insanely skeptical of us.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Storms.
A lot. So, every time the police would come, so that day, we at our favorite spot that we felt most comfortable, the police came and said, hey, the manager drove by, saw you guys here, said they don't feel comfortable. We came here. I showed them all the water, all the food, all the everything. I mean, I'm like, dude, there's no way we're here to loot, you know? I mean,
Right.
It became very obvious very quick that we weren't looters. And they said, oh, well, thank you very much. You know, the police were, thank you guys so much. That's really cool. And then they're like, well, let us call the people. As long as that's cool, you guys can stay here. Well, that wasn't cool. So we moved to the next spot. Luckily, that's why we have multiple spots. When we got to the next spot, the storm was already starting so bad that there wasn't anybody to come and bitch about us being there.
Right.
Right.
So we get to the next spot, and then we bunker down. Crazy being in a storm, especially in a truck. You don't feel very safe. Like I said, you got to have a couple drinks. I know that sounds like we're going down to storm chase and whatever, but if you've ever been in a hurricane before,
It was like 100-mile-an-hour winds.
it's sketchy. It's super sketchy, and it's super nerve-wracking. And if
Are you in
don't
the
have
middle of
something-
the garage? Like, is your car in a specific
the
place?
garage
to...
that we are in, we could only fit on the first floor. So it basically had been lifted so that, like, if trucks were delivering stuff, they could make it their way through. So the first place we were in had walls on 3 sides. We felt very safe there. The second place was basically kind of like a drive-through scenario. So we parked it in the very middle. It was wide enough where we still felt safe. We were getting wind, heavy wind, but it wasn't bad enough to, you know, be like, we need to go to our third spot. So to make a long story short about the storm, I mean, we just rode it out. And then the next morning we woke up. Believe it or not, we slept just from sheer, like, I think when you're so stressed out like that, it's just sheer exhaustion. So we woke up the next morning to still the sounds of wind moving and the whole truck moving. We had made it probably through the first 3/4 of it and then had fallen asleep. Woke up, the storm had just started to finish, and then we hit and then the police came again. A guy showed up and the police came again and said, what's going on? And we said the same thing, like, hey, you know, at that point I was frustrated. I was like, dude, we're just trying to help.
Yeah.
We have all this water and stuff, but they were cool. I mean, you got to look at it from their perspective.
Sure.
They don't
They're
understand
doing
what the
their
hell
job.
is going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So
So
they let us go, and we go. We hit the road, and we come out into Tampa, and we immediately see nothing that we thought I would have seen, which is, and I mean that in the sense of nowhere near the destruction that I had expected. Everything seemed to be structurally okay. High water, but nothing really that needed our urgent attention or anybody's urgent attention, really. So we started heading south. We had heard that it had hit a lot heavier south. So we headed south towards Naples and Marco Island. We turned the radio on. As the radio's going, they're saying Marco Island was hit really bad. We're getting closer to Marco Island. We're starting to see a lot more debris, a lot more damage, a lot more flooding. And we're going, okay, well, we're going in the right direction. And then I look on my computer and I see that I look up and I see that the Keys, one of the things that pops up is it says the Keys looks like a war zone.
Right.
And they show pictures of like 3 or 4 boats in the middle of the Keys and just complete destruction. And I looked at the guys and I said, I think we should go to the Keys. I think that's where, we would be most
Sure, they
utilized.
were thrilled.
So they agreed. And we had already gone all the way south. We jumped on 41, I believe it is, which is south of Alligator Alley.
You went
Tamiami Trail.
So to be clear, you went from the Atlantic coast to the Gulf Coast, and now you're going back to the Atlantic coast,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So you're like crisscrossing Florida, and then from north to south Florida is like a day, right?
Correct.
Man, that's a ton
it's
of
like, well,
driving.
if you were just a regular person, like north to South Florida would be 5 to 6 hours,
Is that
7
it?
hours. It's well, if you were going to Key West, Miami to Key West, you're talking about another 3 hours
Yeah.
or so.
Like
So
Orlando to Key West, I remember doing that one time, and it seemed like it took all day.
it's a long day.
Nobody on the road.
Right.
Well,
It's a long
but
day.
there's like debris and there's
Right.
rain and
horrible
stuff.
debris.
So
we got videos. Once we hit,
that's got to be. But the point is that's slow driving, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
from
once we hit Marco, like Naples and Marco Island, once we hit 41, it was slow driving.
Right.
We hit 41 and we started encountering, like some of the photos I post on Facebook, a huge power transistors or whatever they would be called down in the middle of the road. that's a huge thing you'll see in hurricanes. There's just power lines everywhere, and it's super horrifying. And then
You don't know if they're live.
I got one or two videos where we're driving on 41, and as far as you can see, there's at least a foot of water on the road. So it's like we're going maybe 15, 20 miles an hour, cutting across from west to east towards the Keys in a foot of water in the Everglades. I make a comment in one. I'm like, usually when you drive through the Everglades, you don't actually drive through the Everglades.
Right.
We're literally in the water.
And all right. So, what day of the week is this now? Is this Sunday? Monday?
This would be Monday morning.
Okay. So
very early Monday morning.
Yeah. So the hurricane was happening like Sunday morning.
Hurricane was still hitting the northern part of Florida and moving northward.
Okay.
The minute, because normally if we were in a regular truck or something, I would have just said, let's go right now because we can handle winds. But with the box truck, it's like a sailboat. You know, if you go on anything heavy, you'll be blown away. So, but once it let up enough for us to leave, we headed south.
So now this is after the hurricane now.
Correct.
And you're driving through the Everglades to Key West.
Correct.
Or to the Keys. All right.
Correct.
Keep
so
going.
as we're going, we luckily through that road goes through like the Indian reservations and everything. One of the Indian reservations, we saw people parked at a gas pump. We're like, what? In the middle of nowhere. We pull over, and since all their gas pumps are above ground at this place, they're all like huge tanks. Normally, if you have a gas station and a storm hits like that, you have to check for groundwater penetrating the gas pump before they'll ever let you use it. Well, since these were above water, they turned them on and they worked. So we got lucky and we got to fill our gas tanks one more time before heading south.
Nice. Hey, did you go to the Big Cypress Seminole Indian Reservation? You
absolutely.
did? On Alligator Alley, right?
Well, yeah, I think it connects. It goes all the way. Yeah.
Saw a Fish concert there on Y2K.
Nice.
All night long, right? Fish
Do you
played
know
there.
Fish?
Yeah, absolutely.
They played there. You kind of look like John Fishman, actually.
Oh,
the
yeah.
drummer.
Nice.
Hey, Nelly, put a side-by-side of Joe and John Fishman up. You kind of look it up. You kind of look like the drummer from Fish.
Nice.
Anyway, Big Cypress Seminole Indian Reservation right down there. Go ahead.
Thank you.
I went to a Langerado music festival at the Big Cypress.
Yeah?
So that was cool.
Nice. See, those guys got it figured out, man. You have rock concerts on your reservation, man.
It's a pain in the ass to get there, but
It is.
It's a good show.
See a lot of alligators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, all right. Back to the story.
As we're making our way, at this point on 41, there's really not a lot of any type of people living there. So it's not like we have to worry about helping anybody at this point. We're just trying to get to some place where we can help somebody. We're looking on the internet as much as we can try to get reception. It's coming in intermittently. And
And no one's stopping you?
no. At this point, nobody stops you because at least in that part of the state, there's not much going on. And we're still like literally right after the storm.
Wow.
So like at a certain point in time, they usually take police and first responders off the roads. Like in Tampa, I think it was like 4 or 5 o'clock. They said we're pulling our guys. So if you need help after that, sorry.
You're on your own, yeah.
Right. So at this point, they still hadn't deployed all the first responders to the areas that we were driving through. So we keep going and we keep seeing. All of a sudden, we start getting close to Key West and listening to the radio, and they say that they're stopping everyone. Or I'm sorry, we're getting close to the entrance of the Keys, and they say they're stopping everyone at Florida City, which is the entrance of the Keys. And we're all looking at each other going, oh, man, that's not good. We see the photos of the lines of cars and everybody blocked up there. And then sooner than later, we get into that line.
And these are other people you think trying to go and help?
I think a lot of them, I would say probably 90, well, I don't want to say, I'm just speculating, but I would say probably 80% of them were homeowners who probably wanted to get down to their homes. There were in our group people that were trying to help, and a lot of those people, believe it or not, weren't allowed in. We were seeing people in front of us who had, like, let's say, a big work truck with like a Bobcat on it, and they were being turned away.
And then you come.
Well, and then we came up, and I saw people getting turned away, and I go, we're going to have to come up with something to say that's going to allow them to let us in. Something, a deal that's too good for them to say no to. And I was like, we've got nothing but skepticism the whole time that we've been down here so far. So I was like, we need to be more assertive about this. We need to be, when we pull up to these police, we need to be more assertive about what we're doing, where we're from, and how we're going to help, and the fact that we want to do it now. So we pull up to the first guy, and they're immediately just saying, turn this way, move away, you're not going anywhere. So we pull up to the guy and said, no, we're part of a group. We help out from our small town. We're like first responders. We have 200 cases of water. We have 200 gallons of fuel. We have food, clothes, tools that can be used without any type of power. We have generators, everything. He goes, go to the next guy. So that was cool. We're like, all right. So we go to the next cop. Same thing. Obviously, they don't walkie-talkie to each other. We pull up to the next guy. He goes, what's up? And we're like, say the same exact thing. He goes, all right, go to the next guy. We go to the third guy. And this guy,
how far apart are these guys?
The first two were like probably 100 yards apart. It was like a very preliminary guy who was just directing traffic. And then he sent us to the guy who was like stopping anybody. We get to the guy who's stopping anybody. And then the next one that he sends us to is probably like 500 or 600 yards. It's a lot farther down, a lot closer to the entrance.
It's like the farther you go is the more senior the guy is.
Oh,
right?
big time.
Because he's closer to the shit, and he's telling you
big time.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
Like they probably send like the rookies out to
Right.
the first guy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So we get to the third guy, and the third guy, then all of a sudden it gets serious. We give him the spiel. And he goes, all right, he starts asking questions as opposed to just being like, all right, go ahead. He starts asking questions. He goes, well, who are you here with? And we said, well, we're not here with anybody, but I registered with the state of Florida as a volunteer, which I had. But that registration is basically for people who want to come down in the aftermath.
Afterwards.
To help rebuild and all that other stuff. So, but I had said, I just as anything to make us sound more official than technically what we were. And I know there's people who probably listen to this and go, that's shitty of you. But it was the only way we were going to get down
there. You wanted to help.
So, right. So we say, hey, we I applied with the, I'm registered with the state of Florida, this and that. We have all this fuel, all this water. And every time I go a little farther, I'm saying, adding 10 gallons to everything that we have. You know what I mean? Because it's working. So then he goes, all right, well, here's the deal. I'm going to want you to pull up to that girl right there. And we're gonna get some information from you, and we'll see if we can let you go through. And mind you, it's me, Billy, and Evan sitting in no seat whatsoever.
No
He's just
seat
sitting
belt.
no seatbelt. He's like, go up. So we pull up, and the lady again, no walkie-talkie, stands there and goes, okay, what's the deal? Say the same thing over again. The guy who was close enough, this is probably 50 yards, walks up to that lady and says, well, here's what he said. They call in. She must have been the big cheese or something. She came in and she goes, what's the story? And they're like, they have food, water, and fuel. She's like, they have fuel and water? And he's like, and we were like, yes, we have all that. I thought they were going to check our contents. I thought they were going to check our contents, get our IDs, get our,
you
go
didn't
through
even
all
have
stuff.
to open the truck?
No, she heard water and fuel and said, go.
Wow.
And we went, wah, and then it was just nothing. There was just us and the road, nobody else on the road. I had guessed that after being down in Key West, I found out that they weren't letting anybody down because the bridges hadn't been checked yet.
Oh, lovely.
So that's what I would have thought, because it's like one road to Key West, right? And it's got water on both sides of it, right? So I would imagine
they were afraid that the bridges weren't, and then we hear the Key West radio start to come in, and they're just saying all this horrible stuff, they're turning away tankers and just getting everybody pissed off. And what they don't realize is, they're turning away a tanker because if that tanker crushes the bridge, nobody's getting in or out. You know what I mean?
And there's people, you knew there were people on the other side, or
we knew there were people there that needed to be helped. In any storm, people always stay. Always. Yeah. There are people who either have dogs they don't want to leave, or there are people who are just too attached to their property, or they're just real stubborn people that are like, I ain't never leaving my goddamn home. You know what I mean?
I think there's another category, right? Because I remember when Harvey was happening, they were interviewing somebody on like CNN or MSNBC, and man, the narrative that this guy was constructing for why he was staying in his house was so cockamamie that what I really was hearing was, I can't afford to leave.
Yeah,
Because I think that, or they've got no place, they just don't have a place to go. Mm-hmm. And there's this psychological safety that you feel in your own house where you don't have to spend money, and that trumps the insecurity of being in the middle of a hurricane that's going to destroy your house.
Yeah.
I think money does have a factor, though.
Sure.
I will say there are people who stay because they don't have the money.
Yeah.
And Key West may seem like, oh, well, there's people with mansions. There's a lot of people who live in poverty.
A lot of drug addicts, a lot of heroin addicts down there.
Oh.
Big time. Alcoholics.
Thank you.
And that's the other thing that we also helped, I think, immensely with was a lot of the homeless population in Key West are alcoholic.
Right.
Big time.
Yep.
And the only withdrawals that kill people is alcohol. And so all these people, when they have no way to buy another beer or get anything else because everybody else is gone, it really puts them in a dangerous situation. So to get onto the story, we start going down, and immediately we are, our suspicions were confirmed that this is where we should have been, because we immediately start seeing a ton more destruction than anything we saw on the mainland. It gets worse and worse and worse as we keep going down. Every mile that we're going down, it's getting worse and worse, to the point where cars are blown off. I mean, the road is completely covered. At one point, all the police, if there are any police, are coming this way towards us, all on the one-way street, because this side is completely filled with ocean debris. I mean, it's literally like the Wild Wild West. It's insane. And at this point, we hadn't really seen anybody. But as we get closer down, we start seeing people like walking down the road.
So what was your first encounter of a human being?
Well, we had seen people driving. 99% of them are people who are like police who were either going down like we were. And mind you, like the speed limit's like 45. Everybody's driving because it's like first responders and us. We're going like 75. Wow. We get down probably about 3/4 of the way through the Keys, and we see this kid just walking with nothing, northbound. Well, he's walking north on the southbound side of the road, and I pulled over, like, all right, we can just tell. You can tell right away that he's just like dazed. So we pull over. He's probably like 14, 15 years old. Ugh. And we pull over and we say, hey, do you need water? And he's like, yeah. So we give him, like 5, 6, 7 bottles of water, whatever he could carry.
Right.
We load him up with water, and he just starts walking again. He says thank you and starts walking again. He just started walking again. Yeah. I mean, it was like, and then, when you're after a storm like that, I think everybody's just kind of in shock. And so we go farther and we see more people starting to just walking around, and we give them more water. And we all look at each other, and there was a point where like we definitely came to the right place. Mm-hmm. And which
I'm imagining like a zombie like scene out of a movie.
Right.
It's just like, because
weird.
People had to be dazed, and
it's
right?
kind of like that. It's kind of like that. It's real bizarre. It's something that you can't really explain or put into words unless you're there, because mind you, there's only maybe 1/8 of the population around, so it's not like there's people around. There's destruction everywhere, and there are random people who are just walking out going, this is their Chagrin Falls. You know what I mean? It'd be like walking through Chagrin Falls and seeing it in shambles and crumbled.
Which,
right.
by the way,
you're just like,
Key West ain't that big, right? I mean, it's like the downtown area is like Chagrin Falls. I mean, It's bigger, but it's not that much bigger. It's like one big strip, a couple. I think,
True.
if my memory's
It is. They have it is bigger than Chagrin.
Is that where the hamburger place is?
Cheeseburger.
Is
That's
that
in South Florida, and there might have been one in Key West. I think
I went to my honeymoon there.
Yeah. Nice.
Go to your honeymoon there.
Nice.
We're high class.
But the worst damage was right before Key West. I mean, like the Keys before the Key West were bad. And that's where we saw everybody really kind of wondering about, well, that's not true. Once we got to Key West, everybody was doing the same thing. Like I said, it'd be like walking through Chagrin and just seeing destruction everywhere. And
these are their homes. I mean, these are their lives.
Exactly. And
is it raining at this time, or is it
beautiful.
Storms past?
It's gorgeous.
Oh, is that right?
Absolutely gorgeous.
Wow. That's
Even
surreal.
worse.
It's absolutely gorgeous. When you're going over the 7 Mile bridge, there was maybe, mind you, on your 7 Mile bridge, and we saw, I think, 1 or 2 other cars the whole time, and they were both, I think, police. So
that is surreal.
And it's gorgeous. The sun is out. The water's blue. The water was this weird, like, turned up white. Usually it's like that crystal turquoise. Mm-hmm. It was like a white turquoise from all the sediment that had been riled up from the storm. But it's beautiful. Oh, that'd be great.
And were you afraid of not driving straight because you couldn't see the road? I mean, what if you veered off to the right? You could be on a bridge. You wouldn't know.
Well, on the bridges, luckily there's not as much like ocean debris and stuff, so you're okay on a bridge. But I've been down a few times, so luckily I knew like you're familiar with going over. Once you go over, actually, to make a point of it, you don't really worry as much about the bridges because that's where everybody, when you live in a low-lying area like that, that's where everyone put their cars. So if you couldn't drive out of the Keys in time, everybody took all their cars and they put them all up on the bridges and the buttresses of the bridge because it's the highest point.
Right.
There's no other high points.
And did you see that?
Oh, there are cars everywhere. Cars, some smashed, RVs flipped, but a lot of them made it through. They looked tattered and battered, but they were there, and they weren't,
And what do you think was a couple of the heroic moments that you really felt that you impacted and made a difference on somebody?
Well, once we got down there, the first thing we did was we said we had been listening to the radio, and we knew it was pretty dire down there, and we said we need to get our supplies to an area that needs them, that can distribute them, because we could drive around all day and pass water out to people, which we were doing continually, but it's not going to make as much of an impact as somebody or some place where people are going to get stuff. So at that time they hadn't made an exact location for a shelter. There was I think they called it a last resort place of refuge during the night of the hurricane on Key West High School. But that was only for the night of the hurricane. So then the next day, they were saying on the radio that it was at this shelter, but they weren't sure if they had set it up yet. So we said, you know what, we're going to go to the police. We go to the Key West Police Department, and we say, hey, we have all this stuff. We drove down from Ohio. Again, they go, what? And we said, we got all this stuff. We want to get it out to people who need it the most. And that's why we came down. And so the Key West Police, she says, the lady who came out first says, all right, hold on. 3 cops come out. We say the same thing, and the cops go, really bizarrely, they go, we don't need any water. I think we're going to be okay.
What?
And I said, what? And I think they were implying that, like, we brought water for them specifically.
Oh.
And because they had like a pallet of water or 2 already stocked up. And I said, no, we brought this down. I mean, for you guys too, if you want it or need it. But we brought it down for whoever needs it the most. And we know people need water because we've been handing it out all day already. And they said, all right. So then they called the chief. The chief comes out. He says, all right, we're going to load it up in the hallway of the police station. Pull your car around here. So we pull a car around. And they get a police line, or like a bucket brigade almost, of like 6 or 7 cops all of a sudden are there out of nowhere. And we're loading all this water out into their hallways. And we give them about 75%, 50 to 75% of it, and we keep the rest. We wanted it for ourselves and also to give out to people that we had seen along the way. And then that felt good. That was the end of the day because there's a strict curfew. Once nightfall hits, you need to be not on the road. So nightfall's coming soon. So at that point, we go and we stay at Market Square, and we park our car. And it's really bizarre. That's where all the cruise ships come in Key West. and usually it's just insanely busy, and there's no one there except the homeless people, to be honest. And so we're at this spot, and we crash for the night. We set up camp basically, and we crash for the night. And next morning we get up and we go, we got to get out and start helping people. So we get out and we just start driving north, and start going down side streets and clearing roads, because at this point in time they're bringing in very select search and rescue people to go from house to house and start making sure that people are alive, or if anybody needs help, or if anybody needs rescue. So we start clearing roads, and they were pretty bad. Some of the photos you'll see are pretty bad. So we start clearing roads with the chainsaws and everything. Some people think we're looters. We immediately tell them we're not. Some were still stubborn and said, we don't want you in our neighborhood, believe it or not.
And going back, you said you were in that parking lot, and that's where the homeless stay. Were they there?
Yeah.
They were there.
They were there, so they found some place to stay during the hurricane. Same with the chickens. I don't mean to combine the two, but like you always think of like, you don't think about like the birds or anything else. Like where does a bird go during a freaking hurricane where there's 160 mile per hour winds?
I'm gonna think now.
And there's chickens in Key West everywhere. There's all these chickens and roosters. I know it sounds weird if you haven't been there before. They wake you up every morning, and trust me, we knew. So there were places for everybody to hide. I mean, I'm assuming, and but all throughout we were giving water to everybody. You could tell that they needed water. So the next day we wake up, we start clearing roads. We're getting pushed back here and there, but I told the guys, I was like, this is one of those situations where you have to act like a waiter, where if somebody gives you a hard time, you just need to say, okay, we're sorry, we understand, and then go on to the next one. Mm-hmm. And we experienced that a lot. There were a lot of people who, one guy would say, literally we had this happen from this corner of the room to that corner of the room, 50 feet. Some guy would say, what are you doing here? Well, we're here just to help. Well, we're good. We don't need any help.
Are these residents or are these
locals, straight up hardcore, probably lived there their whole life, locals. And then 20, 50 feet later, somebody would go, hey, man, we got this road over here. If you're clearing roads, you can clear this. I'll take some water. If you see any propane tanks while you guys are cleaning up, bring them over to this spot. So I was like, although we got some negative, I think that's just in any situation. And like we said before, you got to understand where these people are coming from. They just went through a horrible, horrible thing. Right.
And they've gone through it before and probably have been taken advantage of in the past. So they're probably a little bit
apprehensive.
Right.
Definitely.
So and it's just a weird situation, right? I mean, it's one of those like Armageddon situations where you throw reason out the window, social norms kind of go away, and everyone looks either suspicious or friendly, but probably not a whole lot in between, right?
Big time. You're everybody is considered a threat at the beginning. Right. You know what I mean? You're apprehensive about every person that pulls up, especially in a box truck that says, chagrin home improvements, right?
Yeah, right?
I mean, the word chagrin means like to my dismay. So I mean, who knows if they thought
I hadn't
it
even
that
thought
far
about that, but I mean, it's kind of like this strange box van here,
and maybe thinking you just want to be there for business. They want to fix my house already.
The one lady in Tampa goes, "Oh, you're going to sell some water?" When we told her that we had brought water, we're like, "What? No."
Yeah.
No,
There's definitely a lot of that kind of like profiteering going on.
True.
For sure. Like gas prices go through the roof.
Yeah, my brother said he saw that a lot in Jersey, where the first wave of contractors, they come, they take the check, and then you never see them again.
Right.
And then these people are stranded with nothing.
So in regards to helping people, though, I would say the most powerful, clearing the roads was great. We had a couple people say thank you very much. I think that helped in the sense that where people won't even realize it. It's like one of those things, like if you've done anything right, people won't know you did anything at all.
Right.
Because if, let's say, a lot of injuries during hurricanes happen immediately after, when people are going to their homes or trying to fix things or do this, or there's damage, or they're trying to cut something down with the chainsaw they've never used before. So clearing roads always helps first, like the real first responders come and have easier access to help people. And that's what we were trying to do, make it easier for the people who really are there to save lives to save lives. So throughout that day, as we're helping everybody move stuff out of the streets, we hear about the shelter. And this is the most important factor of the whole story. This is the main reason why I wanted to tell everybody who donated. So throughout that day, we had heard that they had finally set up a shelter in Sugarloaf Key, and that they had brought in a C-130. And mind you, this whole time, all you're seeing all day is Black Hawk helicopters, the same one John works on, the CH-53s, even Chinooks and C-130s flying all day. It's literally like a war zone. It's unbelievable. Wow. Humvees going back and forth, destruction everywhere. So we hear that they set up a shelter at Sugarloaf Key High School or middle school, I can't remember. And then FEMA was going to drop off food. So we had all this food, all this clothes, all these supplies. Like the Gooch, Eric Gooch's sister, Erin Gooch, dropped off a bunch, bought a bunch and dropped off a bunch of like tarps and stuff that she was told they needed in the Virgin Islands that they couldn't give to them. You know, they felt helpless. And they said, well, if those people need it, then these people down in Florida are going to need it. It's amazing that they did, because we get this call, or we hear that it's there. So in our minds, we're like, you know, that's our calling. That's what we came down here for, was to drop off food and water to people who needed it most. So we go to Sugarloaf Key, and we walk up and we say to the guy, well, first, there's no one there. It's an empty schoolroom. There's cars everywhere because it's a high point, so everybody parks their cars there to make sure their cars don't get washed away, but there's no one around. So we go into this empty school auditorium, and we walk in, and there's one inflatable bed over in the corner, and that's it. We go, what the hell's going on here? So we start looking around. Finally, we find this guy. We're looking for some sort of administration or something. And he's like, well, I'm about the closest you're going to get to it. And we're like, okay. And we're like, well, we're from Ohio. He's like, oh, from Ohio? I'm from Ohio, too. He's like, where are you from? And we're like, Chagrin Falls. He's like, oh, I'm from Westlake.
Oh, my gosh.
And he's like, I've been down here 38 years, though, or something like that. So, but still bizarre. So, but immediately a connection, you know what I mean? Like a bond. And we're like, okay. And we're like, we have all this stuff, and we don't know what to do with it. And we were told that this was the shelter location. And he goes, well, FEMA was here, but they were here for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then they left and took everything with them. We're like, what? So this is some of the bureaucracy BS that you hear about when, like, natural disasters happen. I'm not giving any negative to FEMA, but you would think that if you set up a shelter and brought food, that you would leave some food there for people who come back.
And that you were telling people that the shelter's there.
Exactly. That's all we had heard about that shelter being set up. So we say to the guy, well, hey, we got all this food, we got all this water, we got supplies, tarps. I bought huge rolls of plastic sheeting, everything. And he's like, well, the FEMA people, when they were here, were saying it's hard for them to deal with that kind of stuff because they don't know how to distribute it or something like that. Or maybe that's what he said about, he had heard that about Harvey. So we go, well, we have all this stuff. And he's like, he's kind of being like, well, there's not much we can do with it. And then all of a sudden an old man comes up, no joke, with a walker and like a breathing tube on. Oh. And he goes, I have extremely low blood pressure. Is there any food or water here? Mm. And he goes, nope, they were here for 2 hours. If you want food and water, you're going to have to come back tomorrow between noon and 2.
Oh, my gosh.
And me and Billy and Evan looked at each other and went, we're dropping everything off here right now. Because then 2 minutes later, somebody else showed up and said, you guys have water. So, like, it was so... it was just one of those moments in life where it was like you were meant to be there at that moment. And this old man who you could tell struggled just to get from his car 50 feet to the front entrance was about to be sent home with nothing. And he had a wife there, he said, who also was not of, good health. Mm. And then 5 minutes later, another guy shows up on a skateboard, says, I need food and water. I'm going to my mother. I rode my skateboard 40 miles down the Keys.
Oh, my gosh.
And she's an alcoholic. She's alone by herself. We need to bring her food. This all happens within a 10-minute span of us being there. And we were about to leave because this guy was like, well, we don't need it.
Here.
Right.
So to be clear, hold on. So you get there, and FEMA had taken the supplies out of the shelter.
Well, they had brought them
And then took them.
Distributed to whoever was there within the hour or two that they were there, and then took everything away. Or they ran out. I don't know.
If you had not been there, then these folks that came by would have been empty-handed.
Correct.
So you supplied them with water and with
food, clothes, diapers, supplies.
So, I mean, that's really, to me, the best part of the story.
For sure.
You guys were really there at just the right time.
For sure.
Right?
It was literally... It was perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they're in a horrible situation. I don't mean to say perfect as in like, but it was like we were meant to be there at that moment.
And you were doing what you went down there
exactly.
to do.
And that's the main thing I want to tell people is that, like, you know, usually when you donate money to a hurricane relief or you donate food and water or something like that, you never see what comes of it. I can directly say that we took that down firsthand, dropped it off, and watched people pick up what they needed the most at that time. They had found a way to get 10 miles from the key they were on to that shelter because they needed something that bad, and it was there for them. So the people of this town helped.
I love the fact that you continued this journey with saying, nope, this isn't my mission right here. Yeah, we cleaned some debris, but this is not why we're here. And you kept going until what obviously was the reason that you were there.
It meant everything to me and the guys because throughout the days that we were there was a lot of discouraging moments. Ever from Tampa onward. Well, before Tampa, people saying, what are you doing? The fire, people saying, what are you doing? You're an idiot. Like, oh, you're going to cause more trouble than you're worth. All this other stuff. From the very beginning, I even wrote in my post, there's always going to be naysayers. Mm-hmm. But that moment of being there and knowing for a fact that we were there, and then later that night, I believe, is when the C-130s started coming in, like 4 or 5 C-130s. Granted, it's black everywhere because there's no lights. And then the day that we left, we drove by the airport. All those C-130s had dropped off supplies, but it still had to be the whole bureaucracy of being distributed and everything like that. Mm-hmm. So those people who came there and got so the next day before we left, to make it even more awesome, we had kept food and water for ourselves for that night. And then when we decided to leave the next day, probably afternoon sometime, after getting some more work done and starting to leave, we said, well, we're going to take everything that we have. Since we know we have gas to get out of here, we're taking everything that we have and we're dropping it off at this shelter. So we pulled up and we, emptied the truck of all of our water except I think 1 case of water, 4 cans of Chef Boyardee ravioli. Everything else we dropped off to them, even if it was like some like duct tape for our tools or something. We dropped everything off. And then when we showed up that day to drop everything off, the same guy was still there. He had helped make sure that people didn't, take more than what they needed. So like some lady came and tried to take a whole case of water, and he said, no, you take 5 or 6. Mm-hmm. And he had dispersed all this water, dispersed all this food. One guy, I was bitching the whole time.
Your stuff.
Our stuff, the stuff that was the only thing there.
Right.
Mind you, that was the only thing in this shelter the whole time was the stuff that we had brought down there. We brought down socks, and I kept bitching about these socks the whole time because it was like half a bag full of socks that they take up space. And they're big wool socks, and I kept bitching at Maggie or somebody who brought them. Or I was like, who the hell needs socks in Key West? So we come up, and I'm talking to this guy, and he's like, oh, the socks and gloves and batteries. One of the locals who was going around, who knew everybody and where they lived, and if an old guy lived here or there, was going around and helping, had local knowledge of the whole area, came in, saw all the supplies, and was working for at least 48 hours with no socks on. He was like, oh my God, he saw the socks, grabbed 3 pairs of socks. Oh my God, he had like no gloves on, grabbed gloves, grabbed tarps. And that second time of us before we left, we had already seen like 3 or 4 people grab water, food, a tarp. Just continually, everything that we had dropped off there was dispersed to people who needed it the most. And it was the most fulfilling thing.
So Joe,
awesome.
We usually have a little lightning round, right?
Sure.
Lightning round questions, right? But I think this could be an interesting lightning round, Molly, because we could zero in just on this road trip, right? Just on this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So here's the
answers
lightning
have to
round.
be about this trip.
Yeah.
Sure.
Here's the
Okay.
lightning round questions. What would you say the biggest success, the biggest moment of success was on this trip?
I mean, there were a few, but to group them together, watching people pick up the supplies that everybody had donated, and and knowing that some of them like had tears in their eyes, knowing that they needed the things that were there. That would not have been there if it hadn't been for the people of Chagrin Falls and Bainbridge and the community.
And
so
you,
that was,
Joe. And you.
well, all we did was drive. So
Oh, stop it! You guys were heroes,
Yeah.
man.
I don't know.
All
about
right.
that.
Biggest failure on this trip. Defining failure any way you'd like to define it.
Well, not considering burning down the gas station.
I'd say
Which
that was a
he did not
success.
do.
I'd say that was a
Let's
success.
be
Surviving
clear about that.
fiery gas station. That's like an obstacle in a video game, I think, sir.
I think the biggest failure would be that we weren't prepared to. I think we just expected that everybody would be open arms waiting for us to come. And I think the biggest failure was not being prepared enough to, like I did with the cops at the Keys, at the entrance to the Keys, being firm on why we're there and kind of showing people, with everything that we do with our business, like from our uniforms, we didn't have that. Our truck was random and everything. I think our biggest failure was being almost indescriptive of who we were and what we were doing and making people feel skeptical as opposed to welcoming. I think that was more of our fault than anything because, like you said, if a random box truck shows up that nobody knows with graphics on it that nobody knows, and guys show up with random clothes on and they go, "Hey, we're here to help," you go, "Get the hell out of here." You know what I mean? Like, we don't need your help. So I think that was our biggest failure. I think if we ever did anything like that again, we would want to, have, more of an appearance that shows why we're there. And
I think the next time there's a giant hurricane down there, you could probably get like a caravan of people just listening to this story. Like, I want to go next time.
Yeah, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of that. It's got to be pretty rewarding. I don't need to ask mine because mine wouldn't make sense. But
how would it work? How could we work?
I know his mother, so I know that he has a lot of respect. My question is always about the woman in your life being an influential person.
huge.
That's
would
totally
say that your
relevant,
mother,
actually. I think
because she was there. So I dropped off water, and she was there helping organize. She was very worried about you,
sure.
But she had made a comment. I said, "It's just so great." I always like to compliment the mother on producing this, and I said, "You did a great job with both your boys that I know, because I know there's other kids." And she said that you saved their life, that you came home from Florida and took care of their house or something. She almost lost the house, and you something like that, and you single-handedly took care of them, and if it weren't for you, things would be different for her. And I thought that was pretty amazing that she would say that about you. So I knew
without
the relationship.
We wouldn't have done probably what we did. So she
Yeah.
is by far the most influential person in what I do and how I treat other people, most definitely.
All right, and then the last lightning round question is:
This will be a good one.
Is there an generally it is what's an embarrassing thing that happened that you haven't told anybody yet?
But we're going to say just the trip, right? An embarrassing thing on the trip.
But if you can't think of one on the trip, then
We'll take
anytime
it.
There's
anyway.
plenty of embarrassing things that happen on the trip. I'm just trying to think of a good one.
Bonus.
I would say, I guess it's not as much as it's kind of crude.
Oh, the cruder the better.
So in the box truck, when we were spending the nights, the first couple of nights with the hammocks set up the way they were, one of the nights Billy was directly under me, and there's only so much space between walls that you can hang.
Oh, no.
I know.
So it goes super low, and I guess at one point in time, Billy had woke up in the middle of the night to grab something, and he like leaned up, and my ass was right there, and I passed gas at the same exact moment that he was.
Oh, that's
So,
outstanding.
That was embarrassing.
We started this podcast with a gassing noise, and now we're
Yeah.
ending it with
See?
a gassing
There
story.
you go.
Hey, Billy, we're going to need you to call in.
Yeah.
Tell that story.
Well, I'm so impressed with you, and
thank you.
you know I love your brother, but now I love you too, because
Oh,
just
nice.
so impressed, and
That's a great story.
it was a great
Yeah,
story.
it's inspiring.
Yeah, it makes us
Long-winded,
realize.
I'm sorry.
Well,
But
No,
there's
the
lots
thing
of
about
lots
it-
that took place.
Lot to talk.
The thing about it is that there's so much about that story that makes you think, man, I really do a lot of just babbling and not a lot of doing. I mean, you like see the problem, know the solution, and go after it. And
no matter what the
yeah,
fear
there's.
is.
Man, I would say most of what you see and hear is not people doing a solution, but talking about it.
Yeah.
And I hope that's
or
what
complaining.
this is. I hope that's what
Yeah.
if people listen to this, I hope that's something that they do. There's always going to be just a little side note. There's always going to be naysayers. There's
Yeah.
always going to be
Yeah.
people who
Don't
say,
let it stop
"Oh,
you.
you can't do this. You can't do that. They said to do this." I mean, even before we left, people were like, "Oh, they're closing down this road. You can't go down that way." I said to Maggie, "I go, watch me." You know what I mean? Sometimes you see something and you want to make a difference. You have to do something.
You had a mission, and you were tunnel vision, I think. Not to speak for you, but you knew what your end result was, and it was to take what you had in that truck and
Get it to people,
and you didn't let anything stop you. So badass.
That is badass.
Chagrin Home Improvement. Joe, where can they find you? A website?
Yeah, our website is chagrinhomeimprovements.com. But yeah, chagrinhomeimprovements.com and Chagrin Home Improvements on Facebook.
You're a good guy, Joe.
Oh, I
You're a
don't know
good
about
guy.
that.
Nice job.
Maybe this
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Well, thanks for joining,
Thank you
Molly.
guys very much.
Good
And
call
can
on
we
the
talk that we
guest.
were enjoying
Yes.
the Grove Hill pumpkin caramel popcorn in case
We
there were
crushed that bag.
noises
Yeah.
during the podcast?
Unbelievably delicious.
Yeah.
It was Apple Jacks. That's what it
Cracker
reminded.
Jacks.
And it reminds me of Apple Jacks.
Oh, the cereal.
The
Apple
cereal
Jacks?
Apple Jacks.
And when is the premiere and everything going on?
October 3rd.
A week from today.
Yeah. Yes.
Awesome.
Very excited.
This may be the last time we see Molly with her feet on the ground. Yeah.
I think next week, and I'm actually going to take some time off that week, and I'm gonna be a filmmaker and just
You are.
wear my
You-
little lanyard that says
Right.
filmmaker and cruise maybe I'll get my nails done.
All right, Molly Gebler.
All right, thanks,
That
Joe.
was
You're
awesome.
awesome.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys.
Have a great day.
Later.